Stop blaming soap. If you are a woman over 60 and you've noticed a smell on your skin that wasn't there 10 years ago, I need you to hear this clearly. Scrubbing harder is not the answer, and it might actually be making things worse. There is a persistent myth that body odor in older women is simply a hygiene failure, something a stronger soap or a longer shower will fix. That myth is backed by exactly nothing. What the actual research shows is something far more interesting and far more fixable once you understand what's really happening underneath your skin. Here's the statistic that should stop you in your tracks. Researchers at Shiseido's Research Center in Japan, publishing in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology back in 2001, discovered a compound that did not exist in the skin of younger adults at all. It was detected only in subjects 40 years and older. This compound, called 2-Nonenal, forms when a specific fatty acid in your skin's oil layer breaks down through oxidation. Sort of like how a sliced apple turns brown when it hits the air. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. The concentration of this fatty acid on the surface of your skin rises noticeably after age 40. While at the very same time, your skin's natural antioxidant defenses, the internal system that's supposed to stop that oxidation from happening, weakens. It's a perfect storm, and it has nothing to do with how often you wash. We'll get to exactly what to do about this a little further down the list, and I promise you, it's not what you think. Before we go any further, I want to know who's actually watching this with me today. Drop your age in the comments and tell me this. Has anyone close to you, a husband, a daughter, a friend, ever gently mentioned a change in how you smell? You don't have to be specific. Just yes or no is enough. I read every single comment on these videos, and honestly, the stories you share teach me as much as the journals do. So, don't be shy. Now, the title of this video calls these 8 things bathroom habits, and I want to be upfront with you about what that means. These are not character flaws. These are not signs that you've let yourself go. Every single item on this list is something that millions of women do every day without a second thought because nobody ever explained the biology behind it. We're going to count down from 8 to 1, starting with habits that have a real but modest effect and building up to the one that, according to the research I'm about to walk you through, has the single biggest impact on how an aging body produces and holds on to odor. Number 1 on this list surprised even me when I first read the research. So stay with me all the way through. Let's start at number 8, rushing through the shower instead of rinsing fully. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but the science behind it is not simple at all. As we age, something interesting happens structurally to the eccrine sweat glands, the small, coiled glands spread across most of your body that are mainly responsible for cooling you down. A team using 3D imaging found that while the actual number of these glands doesn't change much with age, their position shifts. The secretory coil, the part that produces sweat, sits closer to the skin surface in older skin. And the ducts that carry that sweat to the surface become tangled and twisted rather than running in a clean, straight line. Think of it like a delivery truck route that used to be a straight highway and is now a maze of detours. The result is that sweat and the oils that travel with it don't clear off the skin as efficiently as they once did. Which means a quick rinse that worked perfectly well at 35 may now leave a thin residual film behind, especially in skin folds, behind the ears, and along the hairline. Why does this matter specifically for an aging body and not just any body? Because alongside this structural shift, researchers have also documented a measurable decline in what's called cholinergic sweating response. Essentially, how strongly and how quickly your sweat glands respond to a nerve signal telling them to activate. A study published in the American Journal of Physiology found that forearm sweating response declines progressively from young adulthood into the 80s and beyond. A gland that responds more slowly and unloads its contents less efficiently is a gland that needs a more thorough, more deliberate rinse to fully clear residue rather than a fast and out under the water. The fix here costs nothing extra. When you shower, give problem areas, underarms, the groin area, under the breasts, behind the knees, an additional 30 seconds of direct water contact after washing, gently working with your fingertips rather than letting water run past. Lukewarm water works better than scalding hot since heat can trigger more oil production right as you're trying to remove it. For synergy, pair this extra rinse time with a washcloth rather than just your hands since the slight texture helps lift residue out of the very skin folds where slow drainage tends to concentrate. Number 7, using the same bar of soap or shower gel for decades without revisiting its pH. Here's a number that genuinely changes the conversation. A controlled study on women with a mean age of 67.3 published in the journal Cosmetics tested an acidic pH 4.0 emulsion against standard care and found a significant reduction in body odor in the treatment group. The reasoning behind why this worked traces back to earlier research by Schremmel and colleagues who demonstrated that aging itself causes skin pH to rise, becoming less acidic than it was in youth. That matters enormously because your skin's natural acidity, sometimes called the acid mantle, acts like a bouncer at a club door, keeping odor-producing bacteria from overgrowing while allowing the beneficial low-odor bacteria to thrive. Most standard bar soaps sit at a pH between 9 and 10, which is highly alkaline. If your skin's baseline pH is already drifting upward with age, washing daily with an alkaline soap opens that bouncer's door wide for exactly the bacteria you don't want there. A UK cohort study examining the skin microbiome across age groups found a specific shift worth knowing by name. Staphylococcus hominis becomes more abundant on aging skin compared to a different, less odor-associated species called Staphylococcus capitis that dominates in younger skin. S. hominis matters because it produces an enzyme that converts naturally odorless compounds from your sweat glands into thioalcohols, the actual volatile molecules responsible for a sharp, oniony underarm smell. A more alkaline environment gives this bacterial species a competitive advantage over the species that don't produce that smell. For aging skin specifically, this is doubly important because the skin barrier itself, the outermost layer that locks in moisture and keeps the internal environment stable, becomes thinner and less resilient with age, which means external products have a stronger and more lasting influence on what's living on your skin than they did when your barrier was thicker and more self-correcting. The practical fix is simple. Look for a cleanser explicitly labeled pH balanced or slightly acidic, generally in the 4.5 to 5.5 range, and use it once daily rather than multiple times since overwashing strips the oils your skin needs to maintain that acidic mantle. For synergy, follow with a fragrance-free moisturizer within 3 minutes of stepping out of the shower while skin is still damp, since moisturizer applied to damp skin helps lock the lower pH environment in place. Number 6. Letting damp towels sit folded or hung in a closed, humid bathroom. This one is about an environment most people walk past 40 times a day. A 2021 review published in Applied and Environmental Microbiology on laundry hygiene identified that washing machines and damp textiles are a major source of malodor-causing microbes, specifically naming a bacterial species, Mycobacterium oslosis, that survives ordinary laundering and produces a compound called 4-methyl-3-hexanoic acid. This is a textbook musty smell compound, and the research noted this organism has a high tolerance for desiccation, meaning it survives drying far better than most bacteria do, which is exactly why a towel that looks dry can still be a reservoir. Here's why this hits older women's routines specifically harder than younger households. As mobility and grip strength change with age, often related to a normal age-related loss of muscle mass called sarcopenia, the simple act of wringing out, fully unfolding, and hanging a towel so it dries flat rather than scrunched on a hook becomes a smaller, less prioritized task. A towel that doesn't fully dry between uses becomes a damp surface applied directly to skin that already has a thinner, more permeable barrier. Whatever is living in that towel gets a direct transfer opportunity onto skin less equipped to resist it. The fix is about airflow, not extra washing. Hang towels fully spread open on a bar, not a hook, with enough space that air can move on both sides. And if your bathroom doesn't have a window or fan, consider propping the door open for 20 minutes after a shower. Wash towels every 3 to 4 uses in hot water since cooler washes don't reliably eliminate the desiccation-resistant bacteria identified above. For synergy, add a /2 cup of white vinegar to the wash cycle every few weeks, which helps break down the biofilm these bacteria use to anchor into towel fibers. Now, before we get to numbers 4 through 1, where things get genuinely surprising, I want to ask you for a quick favor. If this is helping you see your own routine differently, hit that subscribe button and tap like on this video. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this exact information, and it costs you nothing but a second. Okay, let's keep going. Number 5, ignoring what's happening on your scalp and treating only the body. It's easy to think of body odor as something that happens from the neck down, but the scalp has its own dense network of oil glands, and aging changes how those glands behave, too. As estrogen levels decline, particularly through the menopausal transition, the balance between estrogen and androgen hormones shifts toward relatively higher androgen activity, even though absolute androgen levels often drop as well. This relative shift can influence oil gland activity on the scalp in ways different from your 30s and 40s, sometimes producing scalp oil with a different fatty acid composition than before. Why does this matter for odor specifically rather than just appearance? Because hair acts like a wick, holding on to oils, sweat, and the volatile compounds bacteria produce far longer than smooth skin does due to surface area. If you're washing your hair on the same schedule you did 20 years ago, but the oil composition and rate of production have shifted with hormonal changes, that schedule may no longer match what your scalp is actually producing. The fix isn't necessarily washing more often, since overwashing can strip the scalp and trigger a rebound in oil production. Instead, pay attention to a 48 to 72-hour window and notice whether you can detect any odor at the end of it. Then, adjust your washing frequency to land just before that point rather than rigidly sticking to a number that worked in a different decade of your life. For synergy, an occasional clarifying shampoo used every 2 to 3 weeks rather than every day helps remove the buildup that regular shampoo alone tends to leave behind on hair that's holding on to more oil than it used to. Number 4, drinking less water without noticing. This sounds disconnected from odor, but the connection runs through your sweat glands. A cross-sectional study of community-dwelling older adults with an average age of 83.6 examined what lifestyle factors most strongly predicted skin hydration, measured directly as stratum corneum hydration, the water content of your skin's outermost layer. The two factors that showed a statistically significant association were daily moisturizer use and overall exercise level. The researchers proposed that exercise's benefit likely runs through something called mitochondrial biogenesis, essentially your body's process of building new mitochondria, the tiny structures inside cells that generate energy. As we age, mitochondrial function and quantity both tend to decline, a process sometimes called the aging cell's energy crisis. And this decline affects skin cells just as it affects muscle cells. Here's the odor connection specifically. When skin is underhydrated and the barrier is compromised, sweat that does reach the surface sits in contact with skin that has reduced ability to regulate its own surface chemistry, giving bacteria a more favorable environment to multiply and metabolize. Separately, your kidneys rely on adequate water intake to filter and excrete byproducts like ura, which can otherwise concentrate in sweat when you're underhydrated. Older adults are also known to have a blunted thirst response, meaning you may simply not feel thirsty even when your body needs fluid, which is part of why dehydration is so often underestimated in this age group. A simple, practical anchor that doesn't require tracking ounces obsessively is to drink a full glass of water with each meal and one more between meals. Roughly 5 to 6 glasses spread through the day, adjusted upward in hot weather, or if you take a diuretic medication. For synergy, apply a fragrance-free moisturizer daily, ideally right after bathing, since the research specifically identified daily moisturizer use, not occasional use, as the factor linked to better hydration outcomes. Let me share a quick story here because I think it illustrates this point better than statistics alone. A woman named Carol, 71, from a small town outside Tulsa, came to my attention through a comment on one of these videos. She wrote that for about 2 years, she'd noticed an odor she described as "not me," and she'd cycled through 3 different deodorants, assuming that was the fix. What actually changed things for her was almost embarrassingly simple. She started keeping a water bottle on her kitchen counter as a visual reminder, alongside switching to a daily moisturizing routine instead of only moisturizing when her skin felt visibly dry. She wrote back about 6 weeks later to say the smell had genuinely faded and her skin looked less papery, too. I share this not because one comment is a clinical trial, but because it's a clean illustration of how unglamorous interventions, hydration, and barrier support line up with what the research actually predicts. Now, we're entering the top 3, and this is where I think the real surprises live. Number 3, not adjusting your diet around sulfur-rich foods as your gut microbiome shifts with age. This one requires a bit of explanation, so bear with me. Your gut bacteria break down components of the food you eat, including sulfur-containing amino acids found in foods like garlic, onions, eggs, and red meat. In a younger, more resilient gut, these breakdown products are largely processed and eliminated efficiently. But research on aging and the gut microbiome has documented that the diversity and composition of gut bacteria shift meaningfully across the lifespan. And a body of research on gut-derived odor compounds has identified that volatile sulfur compounds along with ammonia and a compound called trimethylamine can be absorbed into the bloodstream and ultimately released through breath and sweat, not just through digestion and elimination as you might expect. Why does aging specifically change this picture? Because gut transit time, how long food takes to move through your digestive system, tends to slow with age, partly due to changes in gut muscle contraction efficiency and partly due to reduced physical activity and certain medications. Slower transit time means these sulfur-containing compounds spend more time in contact with the gut wall, increasing the opportunity for absorption into the bloodstream rather than straightforward elimination. Think of it like a package sitting too long on a slow-moving conveyor belt. The longer it sits, the more chances it has to get picked up and redirected somewhere you didn't intend. This doesn't mean you need to eliminate garlic or onions from your life. And I want to be careful here because the research connecting specific foods to specific odor outcomes in humans is still developing. What it does mean is that if you've noticed odor changes alongside other digestive shifts like new bloating or irregularity, it's worth mentioning to your doctor rather than assuming it's purely a skin or hygiene issue. A practical low-risk adjustment is increasing fiber intake from a variety of plant sources, since a more diverse gut microbiome is associated with more efficient processing of these compounds rather than their buildup. For synergy, pair fiber-rich meals with adequate water intake, since fiber without sufficient fluid can slow transit time further rather than helping it. Number 2, relying on the sense of smell to know when you need to reapply or refresh. Here is something that genuinely changes how I think about this topic. Multiple researchers studying age-related body odor have noted that older adults often have a reduced ability to detect their own scent changes tied to normal age-related shifts in olfactory function, the sense of smell itself. This creates an almost cruel irony. The body odor changes most associated with aging happen precisely when your ability to detect them is also declining. One researcher's commentary noted that residents in assisted living communities often don't complain about unpleasant smells among each other, not because the smell isn't present, but because the collective ability to detect it has diminished. This is why I find the framing of this entire topic, older women smell bad, genuinely unfair when stated as a character judgment because it's describing a sensory blind spot that has a real physiological basis, not a failure of effort or care. You cannot fix a problem. You cannot smell, no matter how diligent you are. So what's the practical workaround for aging bodies specifically, since you can't fully rely on your nose? You build in objective checkpoints instead. This might mean asking a trusted person the way Carol effectively did to give you honest, kind feedback rather than waiting to notice something on your own. It might mean keeping a routine that doesn't depend on smell-based judgment at all, applying deodorant or moisturizer at a fixed time each day, regardless of whether you currently notice anything off. For synergy, pair this with refreshing your deodorant or antiperspirant itself every 6 to 12 months, since these products lose efficacy over time, even when the container looks far from empty. And now, number 1, the single biggest factor based on the research we've covered, and the one I promised would surprise you. Number 1 is the oxidative skin process behind that 2-nonenal compound we opened this video with, and specifically doing nothing to support your skin's antioxidant defenses against it. Let's return to where we started, because everything else on this list, the pH, the hydration, the bacteria, sets the stage. But this is the mechanism most directly tied to the specific aging-related odor itself, distinct from ordinary sweat and bacteria body odor that affects people of any age. Remember, the Chisato research found this compound exclusively in subjects 40 and older forming when an omega-7 fatty acid called palmic acid, which increases on the skin surface with age, gets exposed to oxygen and breaks down. The byproduct has been described across multiple papers as having a distinctly greasy, grassy quality different from the sharper, more acrid smell of bacterial sweat odor. Here's the part that deserves the most attention because it tells you this is not simply cosmetic. A follow-up study using cultured human skin cells found that when this same compound was introduced experimentally, it reduced cell viability and promoted programmed cell death. And in a 3D skin model, it measurably thinned the epidermis and reduced the number of actively dividing cells. In plain terms, the same compound responsible for this aging-related odor appears in laboratory conditions to actively contribute to skin thinning itself, a hallmark of aging skin generally. This isn't proof that the compound is the primary driver of skin aging, but it strongly suggests the odor and the visible aging of skin may share an underlying biochemical thread, both connected to declining antioxidant defense and ongoing oxidative stress in skin cells. Why does this hit aging bodies in a way it simply doesn't hit younger ones? Because youthful skin maintains a robust internal antioxidant system, enzymes, and small molecules that neutralize the reactive byproducts of normal metabolism before they can do damage. Similar to how a clean burning engine produces fewer harmful exhaust byproducts than one running poorly. As that internal antioxidant capacity declines with age, that omega-7 fatty acid is left exposed and unprotected against oxidation for longer periods, the chemical equivalent of an engine running dirtier with every passing year, regardless of how often the car gets washed on the outside. The practical implications split into two parts, and both matter. First, topical. Research groups studying this compound have explored fragrance and topical antioxidant strategies aimed at neutralizing it directly on the skin surface and plant-derived polyphenols. The natural antioxidants found in things like green tea cacans have shown an ability in laboratory studies to scavenge this specific compound. Second, internal. Since this is fundamentally an oxidation problem, dietary patterns rich in colorful fruits and vegetables may offer support. Though I want to be honest that large supplement trials specifically targeting vitamin E for body odor outcomes have shown mixed to disappointing results. So this isn't a case where simply taking a pill is a proven fix. The most evidence-backed approach right now is a daily moisturizer containing antioxidant ingredients applied consistently alongside everything else on this list. For synergy, this pairs directly back with item 4, hydration. Since well-hydrated skin with an intact barrier holds on to topical antioxidants longer and lets them work more effectively. I want to tell you about one more woman before we wrap up because her story captures why this list matters beyond the science itself. Dorothy, 76, from a suburb outside Sacramento wrote in describing a moment many of you will recognize. Her granddaughter, without any unkindness, asked why grandma's hugs smelled different than they used to. Dorothy said it didn't anger her, but it stayed with her for weeks. This quiet worry that something had changed in a way she couldn't control. After working through several things we've covered today, the pH-balanced cleanser, consistent moisturizing, paying closer attention to hydration, she wrote that within about 2 months, those hugs felt like they used to again, and so did her own confidence walking into a room. That's really what this comes down to. This isn't about vanity. And it isn't about hiding who you are as you age. It's about understanding that your body at 70 is running on genuinely different biochemistry than it was at 40 through no fault of your own. And that understanding that biochemistry gives you real evidence-based tools to feel confident and like yourself in every room you walk into, every hug you give, and every year ahead of you. It is never too late to understand your own body better, and every single thing on this list is something you can start today. If this video helped you see your own routine in a new light, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and leave a comment letting me know which of these 8 surprised you most. I read every comment, and I genuinely love to hear from you. All the studies referenced today are linked in the description below. I'll see you in the next.